Welcome to the PolyPsych podcast. This is your host, Anthony Lindsay.
And Stephanie Marino.
We're here with Rabbi Steve. So we have some questions.
I do. My first question. Hello, Rabbi Steve.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. So my first question, it starts out with, so you've been a rabbi to a lot of people for over 27 years. That's a long career and life. What has been your experience as a religious leader of a community? What are some of the common themes that people go through in their lives? We know some of the sad ones: death, divorce, loss of a loved one, financial and emotional struggles. What else can you tell us about this?
Well, I've been now rabbi for 30 years. I wrote this book, More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us, after I went through a difficult physical ordeal and therefore an emotional ordeal 3 years ago. But now it's been 30 years of dealing with other people's pain and my own. And I guess if you're asking kind of what are the common denominators, I would say, first of all, the way in which pain is an invitation to examine your life and change your life. Number one. Number two, I think a common denominator for the painful experiences I've helped people through and had myself is this feeling of isolation, feeling of insignificance. You know, I'm in this alone. Nobody cares. I don't matter in the larger picture. I think that's a very common feeling when you're dealing with pain, is this feeling of abandonment, isolation, even people feeling cursed in a way. In ways they know they don't deserve. And on the bright side of this, which is really what the book is about, I would say that the other most important common denominator to these painful experiences is that people really do, as a result of pain, change their lives and end up in the end being grateful for that pain because it was the only thing powerful enough to force them to make these important changes. And the end result is, you know, as the book title implies, a life that's more beautiful than before.
So is that the typical scenarios that people come out on the other side better than they went in?
Different. I would say better in some ways. There's, you know, look, let's be clear. This is in no way a book that idealizes pain or glorifies pain. We all wish that no one ever had to suffer pain, but we don't get to choose that.
Yeah.
You know, but again, it is not an idealization or glorification of pain. I remember I had a friend whose name was Paul, amazing guy, who had 3 different types of cancer, and the third type was fatal. And I went to visit him in the hospital when he was dying from that third cancer. And Paul looked up at me from his hospital bed and he said, "You know, Steve, this much character I don't need." So, you know, I'm not trying to pretend that pain is just really just this wonderful thing.
Yeah.
It's not. However, the end result of going through a painful experience can be, and this is paradoxical but true, a greater sense of wholeness. You know, in a way, we're all more whole after we've somehow been broken and had to repair as a result.
Would you call it necessary?
I would call it inevitable.
Okay.
To be human is to suffer.
All right, your book titled "More Beautiful Than Before: How Suffering Transforms Us." What is your role as the author? I'd also like to get into like your community role as well, but also within your book, what is your role in guiding people through their suffering, and what do you propose is their role in getting themselves through suffering?
Okay, so let's start with their role, because such an important question. There's a piece in the book. The book is a collection of essays divided into 3 sections: surviving, healing, and growing, which in my experience are the 3 steps or phases to, you know, being more beautiful than before. Now, what's the role of the sufferer? First, you have to survive this pain, whatever it is. That section begins with an essay called "When You Must, You Can." So it requires you to call on your own internal resources, your own past experience of having been through difficult things before. And then there's a piece in that section called "The Prisoner Cannot Free Himself." The prisoner cannot free himself. Pain hopefully encourages people to reach out for help, whether that's to reach out to your family, whether that's to reach out to your friends who love you, colleagues, or, in my case, all of the above and a very talented professional psychiatrist who helped me through my painful experience. But the role of the sufferer is, of course, first and foremost, survive. And how do we survive? We don't survive alone. We survive by reaching out. That's the first thing. Now, what's my role as a rabbi in all of that? Mm-hmm. My role is, first and foremost, to show up. Just show up. Because as I said earlier, it's this feeling of isolation that's the most painful. So my job is to pierce that feeling of isolation.
Okay.
Show up and say these three important words. Here I am. Here I am. That changes everything for people. When someone shows up and says, here I am. That's the first thing. Then I'm a listener. I'm an advisor. And I'm a connector. I often try to connect people to the resources they need in order to survive, heal, and grow. And at the end, in a way, I'm also a celebrator, a congratulator. Someone who holds the suffering and once they've come through it, welcomes them into this world of those of us who've survived physical or emotional pain.
So their story and can be that person. If nobody else, you can be that person that knows what they've been through and can relate with them, how hard it was to come through and be on the other side now.
Yeah. And just knowing another person knows.
Yeah, definitely.
Is an important part of the process.
So in Islam and in the Muslim community, there's a philosophy that's mandated, and it's to have sabr. So it's to have patience through all of it. And if you were to have patience, that is how you attain the blessings of Allah. If you were to have a tragedy and you remain patient and through times where you're not suffering, to just be grateful for what you have, that's when Allah increases you. So does Judaism have the same philosophy?
It's very interesting. It does. It phrases it somewhat differently, but the rabbis of the Talmud, which is probably the largest collection of wisdom and legal literature in all of Judaism, roughly 2,000 years old. The Talmud puts it a little differently. It says, and a lot of people don't realize that this actually comes from Judaism, is the phrase, this too shall pass. This too shall pass, which is in its own way a kind of counseling of patience.
Yeah.
Whenever I deal with a family that is suffering the death of a child, which is the most intense form of suffering, emotional pain that I have ever witnessed, watching a parent holding a child while that child dies in his or her arms is a searingly painful experience for the parent.
I can imagine.
There's a piece in the book about this. And when in these situations, the most honest thing I can say to people that is both honest and helpful is to say to them, it won't always hurt this much. It will always hurt, but it's not always going to hurt so much. And that's the truth. And in a way, it's what you were saying about Islam and its focus on patience. In other words, time does help, does make a difference. There's no question about that.
So in the whole world, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Time is a little bit. Time is not a linear concept necessarily when you're dealing with grief. I often say to people, anyone who thinks the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line doesn't understand grief, because that's not how it works. It's not linear. This kind of pain, the death of a child, these kinds of pain don't progress in a linear fashion like some cold that clears up. They come and go. They ebb and flow, more like waves.
Yeah,
and you have to know when to try to stand up in it and when to float with it. But over time, you get better at that, and it doesn't always hurt so much.
It makes a lot of sense. I know with some things that I've been through, it's like it feels better, but then one day it just doesn't for a long time.
That's right.
And then it gets better
when that
again.
happens, do you have the wisdom and self-knowledge and the strength of spirit and body to give into it when you must, to float with it when you must, rather than trying to stand up in it and being, thrown to the ground?
Yeah.
So in Judaism, what is the focus? Because I know in Islam that the focus isn't this life. Like they refer to this world as dunya. So in referring to this word as dunya, it is the lowest part. It is Arabic for lowly. Yeah. So it is essentially like this is not
you're passing through.
Exactly right. As a matter of fact, it says you're to live like a traveler. Like no one would build their home in an airport because this isn't our place. So right. You were put on this world, but you were put on this world to be tested. And one of the tests is suffering. Yeah. You're going to hurt. Like, will you still, anyone can worship God when you have everything? If you're given everything, if you're given the kingdom of Pharaoh, it's fairly easy to bow down. But when your firstborn is taken away from you, do you still bow down? Yeah. Do you still worship Allah? So is it the same in Judaism where you are essentially passing through?
Like most answers to most questions about Judaism, the answer is yes and no. Judaism is an interplay between here and there, between this world and the next. And there's focus placed honestly on both. So Judaism is in one way a very this worldly religion. It's a religion of hundreds of prescribed behaviors for how we're supposed to behave during our lifetime. But there is also deeply embedded in Judaism the concept of what Jews call the world to come, that the soul survives the death of the body and experiences existence on some other level, which, there are many imaginings about in the Jewish writings, but obviously, like Islam, like Christianity, none of these are possible to realize without dying, and therefore no one can come back to tell us whether it's true or false. So Judaism is this combination, and I think that Islam and Christianity as well, they do talk about very specific behaviors that we are supposed to engage in this life, which means this life does matter. How we behave does matter. How we treat other people does matter. While at one and the same time recognizing that our bodies are vessels and temporary, and the soul is not. So I think that there's this kind of dichotomous tension or interplay between these two realities. And I think living both for this life and the next, is frankly what it means to be a spiritual person. I was just curious, does your book, is it influenced or does it lean more for the person of a Jewish faith, or is it? I wrote the book for everyone. Okay. And one of the things that's very gratifying, it's only been out for about a week and a half. I think it's been out for 10 days. And one of the gratifying things about it is, when you have a book out, you spend a lot of time the first couple of weeks on Amazon tracking every little blip. I would imagine. Yeah. It's kind of like people take way too many pictures of their first baby when it's born. It's the same kind of thing. So, look, here's what's gratifying about it. It's been for a week. It's been number one in love and loss, the love and loss category. Okay. And it's been number one in the death and grief category. Oh, wow. Now, it has also been number one in Jewish books, but I wrote it to cross over, and the evidence is that it has crossed over, that there are many, many more non-Jews buying this book than Jews. I think in a way, this is very similar to what happened when Harold Kushner published When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Mm-hmm. He was a rabbi like I am. And it's filled with some Jewish teachings, but there are also teachings from the Quran in this book. There are teachings from the Old Testament, New Testament. There's scientific work in this, evidence that I quote in the book. And mostly the book is a collection of essays that guide the reader through this journey of other people's and therefore one's own physical and emotional pain, suffering, and challenges. And it's a journey from surviving to healing to growing. And it's for everyone. I said earlier, in the podcast, to be human is to suffer. And it's true. The question is, will you lead a life that's worthy of your suffering? Will you learn something from going through hell? I say in the very first paragraph of the book, everyone goes through hell, but the point is not to come out empty-handed. That's the point of the book. And that's a point that everyone hopefully can embrace.
Definitely. That leads right into my next question as far as what can a person take out of it? What are the different ways that people are transformed after suffering, and what waits on the other side of a person who is able to positively transform?
Well, I think empathy is clearly one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You really cannot tune into the frequency of another person's suffering unless you yourself have suffered in some way. So suffering definitely makes most people far more empathetic than they otherwise would have been. Suffering tends to make people kinder. I don't think I was a bad guy before I suffered physical pain and emotional distress, but I'm definitely a nicer person after, and a kinder person after, and a more thoughtful person after. Now I run toward people who are suffering. I don't run away from people who are suffering, because I remember what it meant when people showed up for me.
Yeah.
So
I think that's kind of a common reaction.
I think empathy, kindness, sensitivity, and better self-care. People who go through some painful experience, by the way, particularly physical or in a relationship like marriage and divorce, take much better care of themselves going forward. They take better care of their bodies. They take better care of their hearts. They take better care of their souls.
All right. So you mentioned that you feel like a nicer person. Again, you answered my next question somewhat. Can you expand on that a little bit, on how your personal experience affected your perspective when you were writing about pain and suffering and healing?
I have a big job at a big congregation. We have 3 campuses and 2 early childhood centers and 2 elementary schools and 2 sleepaway camps and an adult conference center. We have a community of about 10,000 people and a staff of between 400 and 500 on any given day. And it's a lot to manage.
Yeah.
And I managed it in, I think, a very productive way, but not in a particularly sensitive way for myself or for others for many years. I was a very, very driven person. And it was going through this physical pain that tempered my ambition to some degree, forced me to slow down, forced me to take better care of myself, helped me to realize that not all of the sacrifices I was making were worth it in terms of the toll they took on my life and my family. And I am much more interested now in the human side of what I do, much more interested in that than what I would call the institution building side of what I do. I guess the pain kind of helped me keep score differently. Yeah. And that has been a very positive change in my life. And I think humbly also the lives of people I've reached out to help as a result of it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I could see the importance of, like you said, like the institution building of it. You are the senior rabbi at one of the largest synagogue in LA, right?
Oh, it's the largest in California, and it's one of the largest in the world, and it's arguably the most complicated in the world because we have these 3 campuses and all these moving parts. So it's a demanding role. There's no question about it.
Yeah, but your experience has kind of helped you get more in tune and recalibrate a little bit, which I think is something that we could all benefit from a little bit.
Precisely. By the way, more than a little.
Okay.
It really helped me.
Okay. Wow, man. So would you recommend that everybody kind of take a look and reflect on their lives and what they've gone through? Maybe to have them take a look. Everyone's been through pain, whether they acknowledge it or not. Is it worth it to go back and maybe open some old wounds and think about it a little bit?
Oh, without a doubt. One of the people I quote in the book is the Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan, who said, "I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't the fish."
Oh, huh.
And what he means, right? What he means by that is that we're so immersed in our own reality, we actually have no perspective on it.
Yeah.
When does a fish discover water? When it's out, when it's wriggling at the end of a hook, in pain and gasping for air. That's when a fish discovers water. When do we discover good health? When we lose it. Mm-hmm. When do we discover the true depths of our love for another person? when that person's life or the relationship is in jeopardy, right? So it's only these incredibly painful experiences that jerk us out of our current reality so that we can actually have some perspective on that reality. And again, it's not worth the pain that people have to go through to achieve this new insight. It's not that pain is worth it, but neither is it worthless. Okay. There is an upside to the downside. There is some light in this darkness. Grasp it and change your life for the better with pain as your tool. Pain as your teacher.
All right, Rabbi Steve. Well, if someone is suffering, where can they get in touch with you? How do they get in touch with you?
The first thing they should do is buy More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us, and read it. I think it will help. This really was my way to reach out to many more people than I'm physically capable of being in touch with myself or seeing myself. That's the first thing. Okay. And then the second thing is very soon the website, steveleder.com, will be up and running, and, I'd say in a few days, and then people can reach out to me there as well, and I'll do what I can.
Brilliant. So get More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us. It's available on Amazon. So you should probably get that like immediately. Mm-hmm. It's number one.
That's it.
It's number 1 and 2 categories. So
especially, by the way, with the upcoming holidays, which are very painful for a lot of people. Yes. I think it will really help.
Very much so. Yeah, we have a family member that actually goes through like a lot of heartbreak because she had a loved one that died during Christmas. So this is definitely something that we're probably going to gift her during that time. So
there's your Christmas gift. That's right.
Yeah, you got it. 100%. I really appreciate it. All right, so this is the PolyPsych Podcast. This is your host, Anthony Lindsay.
And Stephanie Marino.
Later.